Okay, hi, and thank you everybody for attending my presentation. I'd like to thank the World Green Economy Organization and the UNFCCC for the invitation to give this talk here at the WGEO Pavilion. My name is Oliver Marchand. I am Global Head of Climate Research at MSCI. Most of you might not know MSCI. MSCI is a financial data provider service firm headquartered in the US, and our main business is really indexes. And to explain that a little bit, so indexes are theoretical portfolios that we calculate. The most well-known index is called the MSCI World. And it is a gauge. It measures the performance of markets. In that case, the largest companies in the world. So if people are kind of wondering how's the economy going, how bad is inflation, they oftentimes refer to an index like the MSCI World. Now, to create indices, for example, to create portfolios that have a low carbon footprint, obviously, you need a lot of climate data. And that's why MSCI has a big ESG and climate data operation. And we have around 100 researchers that work on climate data. Every 2 weeks, we rerun our models and we produce a lot of numbers. Now, I want to talk specifically about one concept, and that concept is called ITR, implied temperature rise. But before I go into that, maybe I should show you our main hierarchy of metrics. This is a little bit of a complicated chart, and I don't expect you to read the chart fully or to understand everything about it. Really, the main message of this chart is that climate change, impact and risk management in the financial industry has almost become a science that is very complicated. So what you see in this chart, it's kind of a tree chart that explains. On the left side, you see the impact metrics that we have. On the right side, you see the risk metrics that you have. And those are two different things. Impact is all about what impact do my carbon emissions have, and the risk is something very different. So let's say, for example, you run a business in a country that doesn't have steep decarbonization targets, or maybe you run your operations in regions that aren't affected very much by physical climate risk. You have low climate risk. But at the same time, if you have a high carbon footprint, then the big question, then you might have a really large impact. So one conclusion that we've had over the years is that as investors are using climate data to manage their portfolios, they might have very different objectives in what they want to achieve with those adaptations of the portfolios. And each of those use cases needs its own metric. Another dimension that is very important, for example, is the question, are you looking at a firm's state right now, or let's say in the past, right now, or in the future? So, if you're looking at the past, maybe you would need to aggregate carbon emissions over the last 10 years. If you want to know what the state is right now, maybe you want to know the carbon intensity today. If you're looking into the future, you need to research what those company targets are and what the most likely trajectory of the carbon emissions of a company is. And that's exactly what we do, and those are the different variants of our metrics. That's why it's become so complicated. Now, I want to explain one metric specifically, and that metric is called implied temperature rise. Implied temperature rise, what that means, it's kind of the given a firm's plan, decarbonization plan, what would the implicit temperature in the year 2100 be if the whole global economy behaved like this? That's what the basic idea of implied temperature rise is. And it's a good scale. The temperature scale is really good because we all know that we need to stay within 1.5. And we also know that, you know, anything below 2 maybe is a somewhat acceptable decarbonization plan, whereas everything above 2 degrees is unacceptable. Now, this implied temperature rise, by the way, is really popular in the financial industry right now. I would say it's the most popular metric of all, and that's why I chose it specifically to introduce to you today. And in Glasgow 2 years ago, an alliance was formed called GFENS, and that stands for the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. And GFENS has also, you know, looked into all of these different metrics, and they have really endorsed implied temperature rise as a metric to use, and they've written actually whole guidebooks on how such a implied temperature rise should be constructed. Now, I'm going to explain, you know, I think a lot of talks here are, you know, very general, and I wanted to, you know, make this talk a little bit more specific about, you know, some area that I care about and that I have some in-depth knowledge about. So I wanted to explain this implied temperature rise and how it works. So you see in this chart the starting point on the left, which is actually the actual starting point is 2019, and we kind of track from 2019 to the year 2022. And what you see is the carbon emission level of a hypothetical firm that you see here, and you see a solid black line, and that solid black line is a line that that grows with 1% every year, which is in average what we know what a company and companies' emissions grow in average globally. You know, companies have done that over the past 30 years. So you can see the black line as a line which is a business as usual line, which represents what would happen if, you know, you don't engage in any decarbonization activities. What we also do is we collect companies. The other thing that we do that is very important is we take the IPCC reports and we look at the global remaining budgets, and then we split that budget into regions and sectors and countries, and we look at the utility that each company provides to the global economy. And given that utility, we define a budget that starts in 2019 to each company. Now, to be aligned with net zero in the year 2050, we need to create a decarbonization curve, which you see here, which is the dashed blue line. That is the line where the company should be if they were aligned with 1.5 degrees. And you can see that in this case, this is a company that doesn't have any decarbonization targets. So there's a large, what we call an overshoot. There's an area between the dashed blue line and the black line. And that is kind of the overshoot of the carbon emissions. And we use a very well-known equation in climate science called the TCRE equation. It's the transient climate response equation. It translates CO2 overshoot into temperature. And we plug that overshoot into that equation, and that's how we calculate the temperature for a company. So given budgets, given decarbonization targets, given the overshoot, we can assign a temperature to a company. Now, the most interesting thing happens, obviously, if we apply that to a large set of companies. We do this calculation every 2 weeks on 10,000 companies. And then we actually apply it to our largest index, which is called the MSCI ACWI, the All-Country World Index. It contains all of these 10,000 companies. And I'm going to show you a chart, this is the chart, what that looks like. This is a histogram of all of the different temperatures. And so what you're going to see is that there's only 15% of companies in the economy, publicly traded companies. We're talking about public traded companies here, not about private assets. 15% of companies are below 1.5 degrees. Another 20 companies making a total of 35 are below 2 degrees, and the rest is just not aligned enough at all. And you can see here the misaligned and the strongly misaligned section. So these are the headline numbers, really. The total index has a temperature of 2.5 degrees. So that's interesting because it's very much in the same ballpark as the stocktake report by the UN. We can see, we've done some analysis, and we see that companies, over the next 10 years, at least when it comes to the G20 countries, for example, we see that that companies in general in the G20 are decarbonizing a little bit faster than their countries itself. But we also see that if we look at the NDCs versus the company decarbonization plans, that would actually change in the year 2030. So, that gives you a little bit of a view that countries, I think, have a little bit of a longer time horizon commitment than companies themselves. To really conclude, one thing that I wanted to point out is that we've actually done this for countries now as well. MSCI has just about 4 months ago started a new unit called the MSCI Sustainability Institute. And the MSCI Sustainability Institute is all about engaging with stakeholders on MSCI topics, on MSCI, on our data, on our methodologies. I invite you to go to the MSCI Sustainability Institute site and to study some of the topics that you can find here. One thing that you'll find on the website, which was just started a couple of days ago, is you can actually find results for this implied temperature rise for, I think, 45 countries publicly available here. And you'll see a very similar chart. And that chart has as you can see, what does it say on the legend? It says budget and projected emissions. And you can basically see if projected emissions are above the budget, then that's bad. If it's below or on the line, then it's fine. Now, with obviously, as we directly see in the negotiations here, the budget discussion is probably the most difficult one. How do you divide up the remaining budgets for countries in a fair and sensible way? And there's probably not a fit-for-all solution. That's why you can actually, on this website, you can choose different ways of dividing up the budget. And I think there are, basically 2 ways of doing that. One is a typical per capita kind of a division of the budget. That's a very popular one. Another one is called the Graz fair share approach. That's a very popular way of doing it in academics. This fair share approach is very different because it does take into account some of the very important debates that we're having here at COP, which is all about the economic development of emerging markets and kind of the allowance of emerging nations to still continue emissions while developed markets have to reduce earlier. And so you'll see the difference in outcome between these different methods. They're drastically different. And that's why we put it on the MSCI Sustainability Institute website, because we want to really start this debate. Now, if you use the most extreme budget allocations, you come up with relatively extreme results, and that's no surprise, right? Extreme input, extreme output. That's why we've also put something in there which we think, right now is probably the most sensible way of doing it, which is kind of a compromise of the different views, because they all have their merit. Meaning that in basic terms, I think you could say, each human being itself deserves, kind of the same carbon footprint from an individual point of view. On the other hand, we have to look at the economic development of countries. We can't totally ignore that. And, how do we square all of that together? It's probably, we need to find some kind of compromise. And you can choose the compromise model that we're proposing in this chart as well. Yeah, this is really what I wanted to talk about, because I think the country implied temperature rise is very topical for this COP, and it might help put the stocktake into perspective, because you can obviously study the stocktake reports. You can also download all of the fantastic data that the UNFCCC has put on their website, but digging through that and understanding what does that mean, which country is actually aligned and which country is not aligned under what assumption, is really hard. And I hope that we can provide some public utility with the data and the teams that we have in the background in translating all of this data into something that's a little bit easier to interpret. Well, thank you very much for your attendance here and your patience. I don't know if there are any questions. I would be available to answer any kind of question.
Thank you, Oliver. I have a question with respect to the company data. Do you have any of that disaggregated by the actual location, emission source location, or is it by headquarter of the entity? And the reason I ask is because then you could map that on top of country data and see the relationship between where the country says it's going and where the companies in that country are going.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the way that, so by the way, when it comes to company implied temperature rise, you can also find those results for about 2,000 companies openly on our website. It's very important. It's kind of stupid of me not to mention that earlier, because we're very proud of having it put out into the public. So next time you buy Nike shoes or any other thing, you can actually go on the website and kind of see. Because the nice thing about implied temperature rise is obviously that you can kind of see from the chart. Where do I have it? You can see from the chart visually very quickly, how serious the decarbonization plan of any kind of entity, really, may it be a country or a company. Now, to your question, what we usually do is, as a starting point for the carbon emissions of a company, we do take the reported data, which is a group entity level aggregate of the data. But you're absolutely right. What we also do is we collect what is called in our space asset locations. So we know for about 1.2 million locations, meaning factories, offices, we have those locations mapped to those 10,000 companies. And what we then do is we call it disaggregation. So we when that a company has, let's say a cement company would have a couple of offices and would have some cement factories, and if, in the case, for example, we know the production level of cement, we can disaggregate that global footprint to those asset locations. So we do actually have that. And there's another model that I didn't talk about very much. It's called climate value at risk. And climate value at risk has one aspect where we look at, the cost of decarbonization. And the cost of decarbonization varies greatly from region to region and from country to country. And for that, we need to know, which asset has which carbon footprint and what's the, expected decarbonization cost under various scenarios. And that's why we need this kind of disaggregation, and we've done this disaggregation for a long time. I should maybe say that disaggregation is extremely difficult. It's statistically very challenging, and I wouldn't say that we get it 100% right, absolutely not. But I think we've advanced this disaggregation model over a number of years, and we're pretty confident because we can verify this disaggregation for a relatively large number of assets today. But emissions data is very volatile when it, not only when it comes to countries, but specifically when it comes to companies and company disclosure, and that's kind of a statistical issue that we're dealing with. But I would like to also say, and thank the UNFCCC, because not only in the not only in the official program, but for example within the GFENS community, I was just yesterday in a relatively large expert meeting where all of the financial data providers were present, where we discussed, what do the new disclosure standards need to be, where do we have the biggest holes, and I'll tell you one little example. One issue that we have is that we ask companies to disclose emissions, but sometimes it's unclear what that means. Is that CO2 emissions, or is that total all greenhouse gas emissions? Or is it CO2 and methane? Because people think that other, greenhouse gases are harder to report. And so we're in the process of creating better standards so that we have homogeneous data sets that are more reliable.
Just a question on the same line, following up on the same question. Now, there are some data like World Bank data where you can see carbon emission from the energy sector. So is it that possible at the country level to calculate the company-based emission by deducting all the available data sources and to target those companies for carbon reduction targets at a country level?
So are you saying, let's say I have a cement company, let's say I have a German, I'm just trying to see if I get your question right. So I think you're saying if I have, let's say, a German cement company that is producing cement globally, would we know from the data that we have is what their decarbonization plans and requirements would be in France and in Indonesia and things like that? So from public data to kind of to find that number from public data, I agree it is extremely difficult, but that's exactly the business that we're in. So I think within the MSCI data, you would exactly find the answer. And I'll tell you one missing piece in the puzzle that helps us do that, and it's called sectorial breakdown of revenue. So companies need to, in their filings usually, let's say for example if you have a company in the US, you need this, I think it's called a K10 filing, you need to actually break down your revenue by region. And so we kind of know through that what the distribution of the business is. So given with the asset locations together, we can better and better estimate what the country level emissions of companies are. We don't get, when we get data from the Carbon Disclosure Project, the CDP, for example, it's not necessary for a company to disclose the carbon footprint, neither by a sectorial breakdown nor a regional breakdown. So that's why you need to infer this data, and that's why it's really hard to get by. But yeah, within our data sets, you'll be able to find it. There's another question?
Yes, please, if you don't mind. It's a couple of questions. The first one, the disaggregation model, is it available for users from the countries or something like that? Like the LEAP model, it's available over there in the website. You can download it. Some countries can use it for free. The other cannot use it for free, but with a small amount of fee. So this is the first one, if it is available over there. The second one related to the what you mentioned about the GFANs yesterday. What about like putting like the other GHG emissions in the form of CO2 equivalent and to be added to the data that to be used over there? Because I think if we just focused on CO2 only, I believe that it will be partially part of the industrial processes and the energy. So the other elements will be neglected. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. Those are really excellent questions. I should have maybe even explained that. So number one, the model itself, so all of our, through 2024, all of our methodologies will be made public. So you can actually go on our website, download papers, and you'll find, you know, I'd call it the math. You will find the equations and everything exactly there. Software, we can't really give out for free. Also, it wouldn't be of any help because our system is super, super integrated. So, you know, there's like database access to our internal databases. So even if I were allowed to give that to you, you know, which I would love to, but it would probably be of very little use to you because you couldn't connect it to the data sources that you have. Now, as part of, the data obviously is available for our clients, but that's also, it's great that I can introduce the Sustainability Institute to you, because for NGOs and for academics, we're giving out free licenses to our data, you know, depending on the research that these organizations want to do, but we really want to invite NGOs and academics to use our data and to use it critically, to review it, to see how they think it's fit for purpose, and to do, you know, the analysis that they need to do on basis of our data. And we've already started this academic data partnership program with a couple of high-ranking US universities. We're expanding it to Swiss universities right now. Just before COP, you know, delegation was sent to Swiss universities, and we're very happy to talk about that, and I can get you the contacts at our organization if you're interested. There's a question in the back. You're a small audience, but you're extremely engaged, so I really enjoy that. You know, I'd rather have 10 people that are, you know, really listening and that are really interested than like 100 that are on their phones. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Ndaisirem Bakwe. I'm from the Gambia, from the Association of Non-Governmental Organizations. And as you know, getting information, this kind of information around our area is very difficult. Mm-hmm. How can we access it? For example, we advocate for climate mitigation and also adaptation and related matters. But having the right information, evidence-based, is very difficult. How can we access this kind of information? Thank you.
Okay, so let me maybe repeat the question in case you didn't hear the wonderful ladies from Gambia, you said, and she's looking for access to data, and I totally agree. Access to data is very complicated. One of the reasons is because the data usually isn't plug and play, so you can't just download the data and do the analysis, but you need to do some like intermediate programming. Oftentimes the data it's a lot of data, so you need computer space, storage space, and computing space, and you need knowledge how to process the data. So I totally agree, it is a little bit difficult. I would say one of the most important data sets, probably in your case, I would say, is the CMIP6 database. And CMIP6 is an international project where climate scenarios were calculated. And you're going to find maps where you can actually zoom into Gambia, and you're going to find very detailed maps on what the heat, the flooding, the wildfire, all of those impacts to Gambia will be. And I think that's going to maybe help you to, hopefully, to identify the regions in Gambia which you need to focus on when it comes to adaptation and resilience. When it comes to emissions, I wouldn't really know, but I guess in general, maybe for Gambia, yeah, I wouldn't know, but yeah, no, we can talk about that surely. So CMIP6 is one of the most important data sets when it comes to physical risk modeling. It's the CMIP. CMIP 6. 6 is just the newest version. It's no higher resolution, better models. It's kind of, there was CMIP 4, CMIP 5, CMIP 6. It's totally open access. Everybody can access this. You can just download it from the internet. It's called the Climate Model Intercomparison Project. It's probably the biggest climate modeling comparison project. And what it is that it's basically a project where all of the big climate modelers of this world have calculated projections. Of course, each climate model is a little bit different, so you need to find some kind of average and the spread between the different models, and that's what that CMIP project does. It gives you a range of this is the worst case, this is the best case. That's what it does. Okay, yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, thank you for your attendance.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.